Welcome once again to Tritiyo Matra. As many of us are aware, already aware that the United Nations Development Program UNDP is one of the most significant and active United Nations agencies currently working in Bangladesh. Since 1972, UNDP and its partners have helped Bangladesh make critical advances in the areas of governance, poverty reduction, climate change, and disaster resilience. The UNDP is currently also playing an important role in addressing the Rohingya refugee crisis. Currently, the UN Assistant Secretary General and UNDP Director of the Rohingya Regional Bureau for Asia and Pacific, Ms. Kanni Wignaraja, is visiting Bangladesh. During this time, she has visited 𝗙𝗵𝗶𝗹, Island and 𝗙𝗵𝗱 to meet the local and Rohingya community and see the UN's work on the ground. Today, we are honored to have Kanni Wignaraja join us directly to talk more in depth about the situation on the ground and UNDP's current projects. Ms. Kanni Wignaraja, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
You have already visited Bangladesh before, the last time being in 2020, if I'm correct. How does it feel to come visit Bangladesh once again?
It's a very special feeling, particularly because the last time I left here early March of 2020, probably one of the last flights leaving out before the COVID shutdowns. And so it was a very different time. We didn't quite know what was going to hit us yet. And there was a sense of a trajectory of growth, accelerated efforts at opening up. So the spirit of what one saw and felt on the streets was a pre-COVID time, as we say. But today it's so good to be back here, and it's lovely to be able to share that with you.
This is probably the 7th visit in Bangladesh.
Something like that. Go back maybe 25 years of working with the UN, with UNDP on Bangladesh and Asia Pacific.
Reflecting on your previous visit to Bangladesh in 2020 and contrasting it with your current observations in 2023, what significant changes or progress have captured your attention?
Well, the first, I think, is the change in infrastructure. You know, it's very evident as one even flies into the country. You can see some of the mega projects that, you know, are underway or have been completed, whether those are bridges, highways, expressways. This is really, you know, something all countries have to modernize their infrastructure. We also forget that infrastructure is not just concrete, it connects people. So the movement of people, the ability to trade, and then to be connected to the world. And I think that the digital to smart Bangladesh is something I was starting to see in 2020, but this now you can see has really taken off. Probably one of the reasons why Bangladesh was able to withstand some of the economic shocks and the livelihood shocks of COVID, because it already had gone into some of the digital sphere much more than some of the other countries. So some areas, innovation very strong, but at the same time you can see the impact of things like climate even more harshly in the country.
Ms. Kanni, having closely observed the 𝗙𝗵𝗶𝗹 and the Rohingya camps at 𝗙𝗵𝗶𝗹, could you shed light on your perspective regarding the path to repatriation and potential enduring solution to this prolonged crisis?
Well, you know, it's the first time I visited both locations, but I'm also very pleased that I was able to first see the local communities. I was able to visit Hatia and looking at the neighboring islands to Bhasan Char. One of the things that strikes you immediately is one cannot isolate each island. These are a connected, or should be, a connected ecosystem. Not just for markets and trade, which is very important, But I think from a human point of view, people need to feel connected. So the sense that there are islands which can talk to each other, which can move easily and freely, then you start seeing a whole ecosystem. And that changes the story of Bhashan Shah immediately. You know? So my hope is that through government, through private sector, through local authorities, but mostly through the communities, we can connect these islands and have a larger community that is exchanging with each other, both from an economic point of view, but also from a family and a social point of view. Human nature is such we need to feel connected. No? Go ahead, sorry.
Did you find any differences between Bhashan Char and Cox's Bazar camps?
Yes, in fact that is exactly what I was going to say. There too, I first visited the local communities before heading into the camp. And you see the need, the depth of need also in the local communities. Now it is quite something to see the national program. I think it's called the Ashrayan program, the housing settlement program in the local community. But there's much more that's needed, you know. So I think it's important for all of us as a global community maybe to take a step back and not look only at a camp situation, but to look at a whole of community situation and say, you know, what are the challenges people are facing? If you put the person at the center and not the issue of a camp or a host community, you get a very different sense of what is going on. You know? Right. So it was, I mean, obviously the biggest difference is you've got close to 1 million people in Cox's Bazar camp. And then you've got the totality is about 3-point-something million. Now, this is larger than many cities, even in Asia. Yeah. Right? I mean, let alone in other parts of the world. So the magnitude of the issue, we have to understand better. And we cannot take it as a single initiative or a sector. We've got to look at this as a bigger, the design and the thinking, architecturally and from an investment point of view, has to be bigger.
In your view, how are international donors and agencies perceiving, addressing and potentially enhancing their assistance regarding the Rohingya issue?
You know, first we have to recognize that when the rest of the world didn't know what to do, Bangladesh stepped up. It was this government that said, we will open the borders, we will take in these people who were fleeing from persecution. And then you saw the international community stepping up. Now the issue is probably everyone thought, whether it was the government, whether it was the refugees, whether it was the donors, that this may be 1 year, 2 years max, and then the problem will go away, right? But it hasn't. So 6.5, almost now going into a 7th year, we're still scratching our heads now and thinking, we have a big challenge here. Right. And we are growing new challenges. Because one thing that hits you as you walk into the Cox's Bazar camp is the number of children. You know, and if there's 30,000 plus children coming in every year into the camp, being born in this camp, we are now having a second, third generation set of issues that wasn't in the original design, right? So I think we are now seeing, the wonderful thing is when you see the photographs of the original camp setting and now, it's back to being much greener. So plants are growing back, trees are growing back, the water is flowing again. You know. But it is still not where it should be. So I think the deeper solutions lie in the political realm. There has to be a serious political commitment to a political solution. And that is going to take both the Myanmar authorities, Bangladesh, but also the neighboring countries, and very much behind also the ASEAN five-point plan. And the global community has to stand by and come up with a viable political solution. And for people who have had to move, they first and foremost do want to go home. But that home, that journey back home has to be a safe one.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And that, I think, is the primary driver we have to think about. That for any human being and we all want to return,
right,
there is a sense that that has to be safe for our children, for ourselves. So you do it with dignity, you do it voluntarily, and you want to go back. The rest in terms of jobs, education, all of that comes next. But this first sense is a sense of safety, wanting to feel protected. And I think we owe that to any human being anywhere in the world.
Ms. Kanni Wignaraja, with Bangladesh poised for 𝗙C graduation in 2026, to what extent do you believe the nation is primed and ready for this transition?
You know, I have always been really proud as a fellow Asian when I hear Bangladesh leadership say this is something we're going to do. Because we don't want to be defined as an 𝗙DC. We are not. We have our own problems, but we're going to tackle them. And we're going to grow out of this label that we have carried. You know. So I think the primary issue is the sense of a new identity. A nation, a young nation, in search of itself, that is growing. You know. Now the issue there is then that the conundrum is that one has had some special concessions from being an 𝗙DC or being defined 𝗙DC. So when the quotas for the garment industry are taken away, when the TRIPS waivers for the pharmaceuticals are taken away, when one no longer has access, let's see, to the 𝗙DC adaptation fund, what takes its place? And that is where I think the preparation, and I think this country is preparing for it. We still have 2 years to go, and then there's a 3-year transition period. Right. I think there's a lot of opportunity there because the soft areas, if I might say, and this we feel as a UN system as a whole, is beyond the physical infrastructure. What takes a country out of 𝗙DC status is human infrastructure, is people. So investing in people's capabilities has the highest return. And yet when one looks at the budget, there is a concern that the health budget is way below what even the regional standard is, but certainly below what, let's say, WHO would say should be the average for developing countries. Same with the education budget. It's below 2%. This should be triple that amount according to the UNESCO standards. Social protection. When I speak to my UNICEF colleagues or my ILO colleagues, they are very concerned that it's below 2%, whereas that also should be a much higher rate. Now the good news is the country has just introduced a universal pension scheme. So one of the most vulnerable populations, which is an aging population, maybe has a chance to actually fall back on something. And I think that is because a country's demographic dividend, I think maybe 10, 15 years more is the payoff on that dividend. So it's good to plan ahead and say, let us look at how we make sure we turn the vulnerability into an investment in capabilities.
As we find ourselves at the midpoint towards the realization of the SDGs, could you elaborate on the role and effectiveness of the private sector in Bangladesh towards these goals, and additionally, how might international agencies amplify these endeavors?
You know, I would say we cannot get to these goals without the private sector. We probably didn't say that loud enough at the beginning. It is absolutely evident now. Just look at, if I take the Asia Pacific, at the current rate of even acceleration towards the SDGs, we won't reach those 17 goals till 2065. You know? Now I'll be making promises to my children's children. We're not going to be seeing these goals at 2030. If I look at Bangladesh, the projections, the national projections, is something like $498 billion to get to those goals. That can't come from public finance or from ODA alone. About 50% of it has to come from the capital markets and from private sector. So the country, I think, has to do a lot to push up its domestic financing capabilities. And this is an area certainly that UNDP is very keen to look at and work with government to say what are the SDG financing, the new instruments of financing, new climate financing opportunities that are needed to get to those goals. Otherwise, they're lovely as an aspiration, but we won't be able to touch them and feel them in our lifetime.
As UNDP celebrates its 50th year of partnership with Bangladesh, could you please reflect on the evolution of the country's development journey in these years, and how has UNDP contributed to this trajectory, and what is its future to continue aiding Bangladesh's progress?
You know, it is quite a journey. I mean, when you think of the birth of this nation, and UNDP came in right after. So I think maybe our first agreements were signed in 72. So it really is a long period of accompanying a journey, and a journey that has had its ups and downs. And I think that is part of the story of UNDP and Bangladesh, is one is able to stay with a country even when the going is tough. You know, so that you accompany the good times and the bad times, and you help to grow with the country, because we have learned as UNDP and the UN as much as we give. You know, so there's so much we picked up from Bangladesh. When I think of the very early programs, they were public administration, modernization and reform, establishing some of the young institutions of government to carry out basic services, to move access to more remote parts of the country. I remember visiting the Chittagong hill tracts 20 years ago. And at that time, a natural disaster, and it was truly a human disaster. Today, look at where the country is in terms of early warning systems that have gone from not just giving a heads up that there is a storm coming or a flood or a cyclone, but telling people, actually, you have 5.5 days, so get out there fast, take care of the animals, harvest, bring the harvest in early, get yourself and your children to a safe place. This is way beyond what many countries in the world are able to do. So I think the fact that one went from a very basic investment in natural disaster management, you just managed it and lowered the death rate, to UNDP accompanying you to much more advanced early warning systems and climate resilience that then pushed back and helped people actually live a more secure life, is just one area. Climate adaptation is one area, I would say, that is a big contribution. Similarly, from public administration, the early beginnings of modernizing public administration, look at where the A2I program now is. You know, hundreds of services digital now available, and the cost efficiencies, the reduction in leakages, the fact that you can access remote communities, that a woman in a village has on her cell phone market information, access to immunization records. This is a journey that the country must be proud of. But you know, a journey never stops. Indeed. So I hope that part of our journey as UNDP with you, with Bangladesh, is that we are still in such a trusted relationship that we can still tell each other, here's where still things are not going right. Here's where things can be better. Because at the end of the day, I would put human development, which is UNDP's mantra or DNA, at the end comes down to the fact that people must have the freedom to choose. Right. And opportunities that they choose, and have the dignity and the empowerment and the ability to actually improve their own lives. And that choice, if a country is able to give to its people, then we know the journey continues on the right track.
As you said, Bangladesh has shown remarkable resilience and innovative in the face of various challenges. From the perspective of the UNDP, what best practices or lessons from Bangladesh could potentially be shared and adopted in other regions?
Well, one is this issue of giving shelter or a sense of a home to the most vulnerable, or as it's called here, the hard poor, because that is beyond just a roof and walls. That is about dignity. It is about safety. It is about recognition and identity. These are powerful things that every human being wants. So those who were on the street get a chance at a new life. That is certainly one. The digital to smart Bangladesh, I think, is something that we proudly take to other countries, not just in the region, but globally, to see how we can move this sense of opening up access to services, to everything that a person can offer, telehealth, teleeducation, so much that is opened up through this, but also on local adaptation to climate and how communities build up resilience. This is another story that the world needs to hear. But let me end by saying, in the middle of all of this, I would put the most vulnerable Bangladeshi citizen. And often that is a young girl or a young woman who maybe for many years did not have hope, could not see where her dreams were going to be realized. If the story of Bangladesh is one of empowering that young woman or that young girl, then I would say that is the story that goes to the rest of the world, on top of everything else that is the narrative of Bangladesh. So that, I hope, is where the country politically and from a prosperity point of view puts its best foot forward.
Thank you so much indeed, Ms. Kanni Wignaraja, for your wonderful insight for these complicated matters. And the UNDP has been a long-standing partner to Bangladesh on our road to development, and I hope this partnership will continue for a very long time.
Thank you, sir.
Dear viewers, that's all the time we have today, and thank you very much for staying with us. Until next time.